I'm Andrei Zavada. I'll be hosting the next 1 hour where we're going to talk about packages, architecture, and how to make this part fun for you and for everybody else. I would like you to make sure your phones are silent, especially if you're around the microphone. And if possible, and if you have the time, please fill up the survey that you get at the end of the session, just so we can get better, all of us. Right, so let's continue. I'll start with, okay, cool. Obviously, this decided to not work. With introducing myself, I'm Andrei Zavada. I work for the LEGO Group. I've been there for 12 years. Now I'm a lead engineer, which means some sort of a platform architect. I started working in R&D, so we probably haven't met that much because I was sitting in a basement developing technology. The last few years, I got closer to production because I wanted to try also that side of software development. So now I can talk about things, so here I am. And some of the things that I've been working on are the LEGO Builder app, which is building instruction on your tablet, on your phone. So if you don't want to use physical stuff, you can download it. It's actually launched for quite a while. And yeah, that's what actually got me to production because I think that's something very core to LEGO, and I wanted to do that. Part of the LEGO Life app, which is a social platform for children, we've developed with Unity, the avatar part of it, because we wanted something 3D, and we had experience with Unity, so it seemed obvious. And based on that, I will make a lot of the examples here, and I've also built a code example at the end that I cleared with legal, with our communication partners and everybody, so you can actually use and have something that's code and not just slides and me just talking about stuff that actually doesn't run. Yeah, and it's all offline, so part of this presentation I can also demo it for sure. I'm passionate about making. I'm passionate about people and making people smile. So if you want to hear more about this, we'll take it after this session because this is more about the technical part. I also ask a lot of questions. I'm quite loud, so if you feel like asking questions, don't feel shy. I'm totally going to vibe with you. And yeah, from what I've seen, I'm the guy with the black trench coat walking around, so that makes me very easy to find. Right. I really want this to work. All right. Good. Why? How did I make it here? So the LEGO Group had a massive digital transformation over the last few years. And we used to be quite few people producing just tiny parts of technology, but not many products. And we relied a lot on our partners to do that. We used to be quite small, about 400 people. But now we grew to a strong digital organization that's about 1,400 people that aim to cater for all needs. And we continue hiring quite a lot. So if you would like to move to Europe, or maybe they also have some jobs in the US, be aware that LEGO also hires in digital. We don't just build plastic toys. We are focusing a lot on architecture-driven and API-driven solutions lately, even more than before, which means that we aim at producing more and more quality. That's another reason why I'm here. And we're also opening up to the community. So I really like our CTO's ambition for LEGO to give, and as our brand mission, and that's copy-pasted from our webpage. So this is not that just I feel like that, I do, but it is our LEGO brand mission to inspire and develop the builders of tomorrow, be them physical or digital. So we hope that that is you. So before I start, when I went to master's, my professor told me in my architecture class that you can't teach architecture. And this is a talk about architecture. So I would like to introduce my biases because some of these things might not make any sense to you, but we have some use cases and they drive some of our decisions. So I would like you to be aware of that just in case you think that this is absurd, what I'm saying. So what I want to underline is that you don't have to do this. Just take what I'm saying in consideration, and hopefully this will help you take some decisions when you get to similar situations. So most of the stuff that we develop are mobile apps and WebGL experiences because we think that this is where the children are. Of course, we know they're on console too, but for now, that's most of the experience that our partners produce. We work with Unity quite a lot to develop these, and it's mainly because it produces small, robust experiences, and the time to market is great. We use URP because it scales well, and it runs on everything, and it allows us to do something that's consistent across all platforms. We produce some internal tooling, which are not just mobile and WebGL, so URP is fairly consistent. Most of my examples are aimed at Unity 2021 and 2022. 2021 because LTS and 2022.2 because WebGL. So if you will try to make a WebGL experience, I would suggest you use the latest 2022. It's not LTS, but if you just try it out, the experience is so much better. And yeah, as I said, we're growing quite a lot. It's good to know that we work across different teams, so we need to share code around. So packages are very important for us because that's how we do it. And I don't know if some of you hire people, but you might know that to hire Unity people might sometimes be hard. So sometimes we take people that have other experiences and then they started doing Unity the last few years, and you can see that in the way they write code. So I feel that sometimes it's good to remind people that there are some things the engine offers you, and there's a reason for why that is. We also aim at scalability. We are the Lego group, and we cater to a lot of children. So whenever we want to put something out there, we're going to think, okay, this is going to hit millions of children. They're going to come knocking at our doors, and this needs to scale. So it's very, very important when we move massive amounts of data around and we make data accessible to people. Right. Now, let's get serious. So, packages. Unity offers a package manager that allows you to download packages either from Unity's own repository or from other repositories. Or it allows you to put stuff from a zip archive, from disk, from wherever. So it allows a lot of things. But one of the things that we really, really like is the fact that it allows you to set up a package repository. And a good suggestion and a good architecture is to have, for example, a public and a private one as you work on your own things, especially depending on the scale of your team. You probably want what's done and released in a public one. And no, this is not Photoshopped. This is actually, Lego does have a public repository that you can add. So we have a bunch of packages that you can use if you want to develop your own experiences, use minifigures, import Lego models, and so on. We also have a private one that we use more for internal and for development and all of these things that we try to prevent noise from you, because some of them will be totally irrelevant for you. But if you do, I would like to mention that if you do want to go for the public one, one of them will allow you to import a model in, and the Lego group has acquired Bricklink, and part of the Bricklink offering is Studio, or Stud.io, as we call it internally, Lego jokes. This will allow you to build models. We decided to not make another one of this because this is actually quite a cool tool, so kudos to the team. My presentation will be structured in 4 categories, just so we can go through a structured way, and we're going to go left, right, top, bottom, getting nerdier as we go down. And it will end with me giving some instructions about how to access some code and how to look through all of these examples in the Unity editor if you want on your own machine. So the 4 categories I would like to structure this talk is, how do we solve a problem, focus on solving a problem. The size of most of your things matter, including your builds, your asset bundles, and why. And if you develop a package, why does this matter even more? How to focus on ease of use and on an ease of change. Because a lot of people just kind of stop at ease of use, but they forget that most of the time, people want to do other great things with your work. So how do we enable those people? Well, I'll start with lesson 0. We use Unity, and I'll mention this quite a few times, because Unity, at least from what you've seen in the previous GDC talks, like this year, I was there at the talk, and it wasn't specified precisely like this, but it is a tool to empower creativity for everybody. So when I say everybody, I mean everybody. Depending on technical skills, different people. If you looked, especially if you're into indie games, you'll see that sometimes people that want to create games are not developers. So also when developing your packages, your tools, whatever you offer to the public, try to think of those people that are not that much into writing code as some of us are. I like writing code, but at the same time, it's more important for me that somebody that uses my code to have a great experience. And I feel this is also where Unity focuses. The editor, I feel like the Unity editor, a reason why we started with Unity a long, long time ago was the fact that I would open the editor and things would make sense. The windows are where they expect it to be, would expect them to be, things make sense. And you can do a lot from the editor. So you don't have to write that much code. So don't force people to do that. So when you write a package, please take this in consideration. Prefabs, variants, and scriptable objects, SOs, are also, you can use them as part of your architecture. And I would advise you to do that, even though a lot of people say, like, Andrei, but performance hits, I mean, extra game objects and everything. Let that be your performance problem. If that's your performance problem, you're doing great, you're successful. So magic folders, another dear topic, is, well, your folder architecture matters, not only because, as Raz said, you can use it to make pipelines, script things, but they have an impact on how your build runs. If you put stuff in resource folder, I hope you have a very good reason to do so, because that impacts your runtime, your startup time, your build size, and if you make a package, everybody else's build size and runtime. Callbacks and Unity events. I really like Unity events because when they got introduced, when the whole UI thing changes, I looked into how do I make callbacks look like the button thingy. That was exactly what I Googled, because I thought that was awesome. And it allows people to read my code. I've worked as a developer. I'm an engineer at heart, but I really like this. Yes, your delegates are faster than this, but again, hopefully your whole system doesn't run on delegates and on a per frame callback. Otherwise, I don't know, maybe some things need to be changed. But if they do, feel free to use your delegates. The asset store is used by everybody, and it is everybody's friend. So when I mean everybody, I mean the everybody that I mentioned earlier. Some people just are not developers. And at some point, I had to write code for somebody, and I delivered a package, and then I said, cool, I need to do this. And I asked, but that's a for loop. Can you write a for loop? I'm a designer. I don't know how to write code. These people exist. So try to make it fun and easy to use. To some extent. At some point, you will not be able to, but yes, at least we should try. And another important thing that was also mentioned earlier, people use multiple packages. So your dependencies matter. Please be aware and mindful of those, because at some point there might be clashes. And they also impact size. Good. Now, let's get color-coded. So, solving a problem. This might be very, very simple and very obvious, but in many situations, when I go and talk to some developers, I'm like, what are you solving? Where's your entry point? And I like to call it the problem.solve. So I would like to see every time a package just to have an obvious entry point and an obvious method. If I have to use Unity as an example, and by the way, Unity did not pay me to say all of this stuff. This is just experience, just as a disclaimer. So the JSON utility is a very good example for this. I really, really like that, because JSON utility, you do dot, you don't get lost in methods, they do what they expect, they don't have a bazillion parameters that you need to feed it in. That's it. And that's how things should be. At least that's what I think. OK, cool. But what would this mean in practice? If I need to put an architecture equivalent to this, what I like telling people, and yeah, I've seen it, for me this is obvious, but for some people it's not. In awake, gather your dependencies, don't make any calls on them. In start, make calls on your dependency. And whenever something happens where your problem needs to solve something, solve your problem, and notify. I think notification is a very important thing that I would like more people to do, because that allows us to put hooks in the system that then can easily be interfaced afterwards without people actually having to go and change code and to dig through your code. At some point, you'll say like, yeah, well, I've exposed this delegate. Somebody can just go in and just attach their callback. Like, yeah, but why do I have to look at your code base? Why do I have to dig through this when I can click very nicely on something in an editor, I see the event there, and I just connect something. Or even if I do it through code, at least it makes it readable. Size, something very dear to me, because I feel like I'm the only one running around and looking at everybody's build size. And people tell me I'm obsessed, but when I say that, well, now we've managed to make a build from 30-something megs to 9, everybody's happy. So why does this matter, and why is this important for me? Because, well, not only build size when you publish something to a store matters, as if any of you have published an application, you know why. Especially Google is very adamant about this, which is fair. But also your asset size. If you build an asset bundle, you have to serve that. It's like, yeah, but you can stream. People have internet connection. Do you want to bet your application success on that? And that's cost for you, and maintenance cost. At some point, you'll have to clean up your project. You'll ask, what is this? Why is this here? So it's also mental bandwidth. And of course, if you do bad decisions, like put them in resource folders, it is going to hit your performance. So always consider size. And when I say size, it's not only build size, also your RAM usage. Because some people just forget that mobile devices have limited RAM. And I'm talking this because I come from the day when we used to build stuff for iPad 2s. And Apple is very successful, and the iPads are very, very resilient to change. People hold on to them for quite a long time because they don't break, they make sense. They do what they have to do, and they have almost no RAM. So if you develop for both Android and iOS and use Android as a point of reference, you'll realize that you have at least 50% more RAM on Android. So back in the days, we worked with a research institute, and they made something that was quite of a decent size as a package. We used it, and then when I ran it, I looked at the profiler, and I'm like, what is this 200 megs of RAM usage? And of course, they made a machine learning thing that ran fine on their supercomputer with 16 gigs of RAM, and there was like, it's just 200 megs of RAM. What's that? I'm like, do you know how much RAM does an iPad 2 have? So yeah, and again, if you use a package, this matters more, because if you make an app, you profile it, it looks good, you ship it, it's good. When you make a package, you don't know who uses this and for what. So you can't impose size limits on somebody else. That's not really nice. Another thing that I've seen, and it kind of breaks all rules possible. Some developers want to make the coolest thing. We all want to make the coolest thing. So we go and change the default .NET subset to use everything in .NET. Then we write some code. We forget about it. That actually uses some part of the whole .NET, so outside of the subset. And then we ship a package. And then I take the package, and then I get a compiler error. My first reaction is, OK, probably it's outside of the subset. And then I look at, let's just say, writer, and writer tells me, like, this is not used. So I write to my colleague and say, why? Can you remove this piece of code so I can just go back to my subset? Because, yeah, why use more? If you go with high stripping, then let's just say that doesn't really impact your build size that much. But this is another thing that people don't really look at. And I think this is the best setting that Unity has. This is the setting that makes me happy when I publish to WebGL. And we'll talk more about this, but look into it if you don't know what I'm talking about. The code stripping is very, very important because some of you might think that, well, code's just binary. Like, how much can it take? I'm going to show you. Master compiler configuration. Why not? It's free performance boost. Make sure this runs for your package, and make sure your package can strip. Mind your dependencies. Make sure that whenever you have dependencies, they're sensible. I keep telling my colleagues, if you can write code that solves this in 2 days, do not use a package. Yeah, but Andrei, but somebody else will have to handle this, and it's nice, we outsource all of this. But I'm like, yeah, but if you're live and you need an update, then what? So take it with a grain of salt, especially people that come from the JavaScript world where there's a package for everything to check if something's a number that then takes other packages. Things get out of control quite fast. And I heard a lot of colleagues that tell me, Andrei, but this is just 2 megs. And this is why, this is the Lego Builder app on our store. 2 megs times 10 million per day. So as this keeps on running, then we have a problem. And imagine, this is your CDN delivering stuff. These are costs. Right. Stripper, my favorite topic. This joke never gets old. So a lot of people say, well, code cannot be optimized for size. Yeah, you can't control the compiler, but your stripper is very good at removing dead stuff. And for this example, I've built a project, and it went from 10 megs to 12 megs, or the other way around, depending on stripper settings. So from high to none. That's a 20% free size decrease. You're welcome. There you go. Let's just drop down. It's a drop-down box. That's it. You have to make sure that, though, if you deliver a package, this can also force people to not be able to use this. If your package will break when stripping, then they either discard your package or discard stripping. So please don't force people to not be able to use this. This is great. Right. But it's even better if we look at what's actually inside the build, because we said like it's 20%. Okay, maybe not that much. But I did not want to remove this splash screen, because why not? So that's a texture, that's 2 megs. So if we take that, now that increases. If I could maybe do something about all these universal rendering pipeline assets that I'm not using, that if you add them all up, you'll see there are more than 10 and there's more in. So as you can see, that if we take all these assets that don't compress outside of the build, it's actually a massive size increase, which also means your app starts faster, especially in a WebGL context, because that stuff needs to get downloaded. And do that in a conference center, because one of our projects was like, okay, cool, we want to do something for the foundation, and the LEGO Foundation talks with all the big organizations and goes to the UN. So imagine you're in a big, big meeting room, you want to give a presentation, and everybody there wants to download the same asset. Like every megabyte scales to gigabytes if your meeting room is big enough, and everything has to go through the conference center's router. And you've seen how that went on Tuesday. So, okay, cool. Could we do something about this URP stuff? Because a lot of people, I've talked to some people, and at some points everybody said, like, Andrei, but Unity is full of bloat. I'm like, that's not my experience with Unity. I mean, I managed to push something on the web that was a building experience for 6 megs, including UI, textures, 3D stuff. So it is possible to reduce this. I was like, okay, what's the bloat? And I thought about it. Oh, yeah, I did have to do something to clean up the URP. Back in Unity 2019, we could do this. So when the asset database did not care that much about the consistency. So I would just go there, and before you would start a build and before you finish the build, you could just put some code to run and say, yeah, delete this from the package. Just ignore this. You haven't seen this. And then would remove that. And if you count this, that's about 3 megs removal. And it's quite a lot if you have something that's 10 megs, and then you do something about the extra 2 megs, that's the splash screen. You can see how you can get from 10 megs to 6, 7, depending on your experience. So this doesn't work anymore. But this is still a good lesson, because what if we could do something to not have to do something like this? So maybe it's your architecture decision. Maybe there's a reason why you put it there. But what if we could do something different? So another thing that URP does very, very well that I really, really like is when you start URP, it creates a bunch of scriptable objects that are all your settings. They have some references there to some other scriptable objects and so on. And yes, this is a good example of what goes into your build, because you can make your own object and then just attach a bunch of items that you need to go into the build, and there you go. You can put as much as you want in the package. I don't care about what I download as a developer, but I care what goes into my build, what I distribute. And an example that you will see also in the code drop you're going to get later. For example, if you look at the editor log, oh yeah, and if you don't know what this is, this should be your best friend. Always be mindful of what you build. So, and this is the editor log. This is technically what goes into the build. So as you see, we have a bunch of common parts, and I've made a few copies. We have a long list in the original project, but for this demo, you don't need them. So this is what we actually use in order for me to assemble some figures. But I've added a few more, just to prove a point. The build does not take anything else if it's not reference. And this is good, because you're using an engine, and it does work for you. So let it do work for you in the good way. So link your stuff. Another thing that I like to do, but it's more of a hack, so feel free to use it. Or, I don't know, hint, hint, Unity, maybe you can do something about this, turn it into a feature. I really, really like the way the samples are managed for packages. So when you import a package, usually it's just the functionality that is needed. But our first reaction is import samples, because I want to see how it works. So I import the sample scene, and then maybe some other things. So we hijacked the samples functionality to enable feature toggle. What I like about this is also the fact that this tells me about the size of everything. Because sometimes, we always have that overexcited designer that wants to put everything in, but it forgets about that actually has an impact on your build. So this allows me to give control to the designers. It's like, cool, you want some feature, toggle them. There you go. Put them in, remove them, and you have full control. Because in my material, I reference these shaders, which will go into these tilde folders. And those tilde folders will be invisible or ignored by the asset database when you import a package. And when you import them as a sample, because the metadata is still the same and the metadata will be copied in, then the connection is being made, and all of a sudden, your material gets a texture here and there. And yeah, you could write, of course, this is not the best way to do it. Of course, you can just write some editor scripts to do this better. But this is free. So if you just want to do this, there you go. And all of this stuff should be tested early. Otherwise, you'll get to a point when you're done with this package, you want to ship it, and yeah, it's too late. All of a sudden, you can't strip because maybe you did not preserve some methods, and you really like to do a lot of reflection and who knows what, and something gets stripped that it shouldn't, and your build just breaks. And then you have to go and start digging, so why not test this early? Ease of use. Like, I know this is a duh moment, but let's go through it and see if it's that obvious. Because a lot of people say, yeah, but I've documented. There you go, read the documentation, do that. I don't know how you guys use packages, but we do use quite a lot of them. And this is why I'm also giving this talk, because I'm hoping that you will create more and more technology. Because you can't, a source of revenue is not only you shipping a game. Ship me a package that's worth our time, and I'll gladly buy it. So you can't make money with this. But how do we use packages? The way I do it, I just download it. I ignore your documentation at first. I run your scene. I see if it does what it needs to, and if I can read your code. And if it's obvious, I'm very happy. That's a good package for me. If I can just ignore using the documentation, that's great. Because at some point, why I like ignoring the documentation is because sometimes it's not maintained. I don't know if you've worked in companies for a long, long time. Show me documentation that was maintained. I was actually surprised when I had to make, at some point, I was for one of Alexa's hackathon, and I used Amazon's documentation, and it was good. I was like, oh my God, this is new to me. So, yeah. Sometimes they're newbies. And as a technical person, you will like to make something, and you're just going to say, like I used on the first slide, I wrote SO. And if something's very, very new, I was like, what is that? Right? And that was on purpose, huh? So what about the newbies? What about the people that maybe don't understand that? You tell them maybe to do something very, very funky that they don't understand. And think of the entire journey of understanding. If I import your package, where do I start? What do I do? How do I navigate your package? How do I navigate your code base, right? Because ultimately, everything you write means something. I'll look at everything. Why do you have a prefab? What are your interfaces? Where are they? And all this stuff. And things matter. And I remember when I was 21 and I started working for the Lego group, my mentor, Jesper, he was asking me all these questions that were so annoying back then. He was just like, why do you use a reference and not a pointer, and so on? And I'd give them like, I've learned this in school. I can answer this. So I was just like, okay, because one of them allows me to change the object, and the only one, only the stuff inside. He was like, no, you use a pointer when you want to pass null, so it makes it an optional. I'm like, wow, damn, that actually means so much. So you'd be surprised what people actually understand from your code. So try to also be aware of that when you program. See if you can have somebody to mentor you. Okay, where do I start? I mean, well, what happens? Okay, I want to make this better, but what do I do? So of course, you start with your problem not solved. You start from there and try to navigate. Okay, the person will probably try to find this. And they'll start from there and they'll try to see, okay, what happens in your system? Can I understand? So let's use an example. Let's say I want to build an avatar. So I want to build an avatar, so I probably want to have an avatar builder, right? So I would like to create a prefab. Of course, I could put a script somewhere, but by default, I don't want to put more work on the person using this. So the best way to use this, in my opinion at least, is I drag a prefab and it's done. You just make a call on that, look for there has to be a problem.solve on this, and that's it. And that's exactly how this runs. It has some components underneath it, but this is more going to be handled later in the ease of change. But this will also allow people to navigate and have a basic idea of what does this do. Why do we like this a little bit more than anything else? Because this gives me an overview. See, this tree view I really, really like. Because if you structure your dependency here, you can see. Of course, I can put all my scripts on that avatar builder object. And of course, I can use require component. But it's not the same, because now I can see that this, for example, avatar user service, which you're not going to get in the package, by the way, because this is only for custom stuff. But we can see that this actually owns this object and uses it for something. It will allow you to change a specific thing if you want later, but now you see who owns what, you see the dependencies, and this gives you a better idea of how things run without you opening my code. Because maybe you don't want to do that, and that is fine. Right, another thing that I would like people to do better is usage of interface. I get a lot of newly graduates that have read about interfaces and how cool they are, and they put an interface next to every object. And then they just reference the object. So you have iObject, and then object interfaces everywhere. So then why do you have an interface? So see where this makes sense, and only use those. Because an interface is a contract. It's something that I look at, and this is what you use in your package. This is what your package does. Another thing that I really want to do is separate my contract from the code. Because sometimes, just say you deliver a, let's say an ecosystem. You have multiple packages, and you have a feature set. And somebody else doesn't like this part or wants to change this one package that you have. But at least now, they don't have to import everything if you make an assembly definition, because that's why they exist. So you can isolate different parts of your code. So you can isolate your contract from the implementation or from multiple implementations, and then use that contract for people to develop without them taking other things, so to prevent bloat, right? Some people come to me, I have my colleagues that really like to micro-optimize and say, Andrei, but like, these are game objects, that this is a performance hit. I like, if you've had to maintain code, readability and maintainability is king, because once we had a platform and we had to modify the string class. So yes, if you think there's something you're never going to change, that's the string class. So ultimately, sooner or later, you might have to modify stuff. So being able to read what other people have written, or you being able to read your own code, because sometimes I had to write math, and you know how math is to maintain, then yeah, you want readability, you want maintainability. And again, if this is the performance hit that I'm going to take, and if this is the only one, I'm happy. I'm happy. I think the engine handles like a few game objects quite well. Another advice that I give people, and why I like this layout, is because this gives me a good overview when things call wrong things and when the references are maybe not what I want. So as an architect, I really want to see what people and how do they want to write code. So of course, I would like things to go downwards and not that much upwards to prevent spaghettification of code, especially not sideways. So I would prefer things to link downwards. This is why there's, as I said, everything matters. So there's a reason why first down and then up. So you can, of course, call your parent and report things, but you mainly want to push things downwards if possible. Usually not sideways, because that means that now I can throw random things in there. Of course, this is an advice. If you have a good reason, do it, but otherwise not. What I would really, really like is an easier way to get to reference things by interfaces. Preparing the material that you will get later, I had to change a few things. And this architecture really allowed me to change parts of the system and not have to care that much about everything else. So as you can imagine, the way I serve assets, cache, asset bundles and such, that's the same if I load them from disk or if I load them from our backend. So I could keep that, but I wanted to change, for example, downloading stuff from disk instead of from our backend. So I would just want to change one and not the other. So some of my objects, of course, there is always a way to do it. If you really want to use Unity to put an interface instead of a mono behavior, this is not ideal, but this is how we like to do things. Just put a game object, get the interface from it. Luckily, this started to work in quite a few versions of Unity ago. I think it was 2020 or something. So you can get component with an interface, and I think that's very important. Please be aware of that. You don't necessarily need to put a class here. An interface works, and this greatly improves the flexibility of your system. Otherwise, why do you even have interfaces, right? Right, and now the example. This is the builder. So I hope this is readable. This is also a good exercise, and this is we can see if I failed or not. So of course it has a configuration, like many things do, and that can be updated. We have a render, because I probably want to render my object. I want to assemble it. I have the asset stash, and this will be an optional thing that you are not going to have, but this is, if you're a logged in user, you can get your own data and so on. And something if I want to force it to run in offline mode. Then all my Unity events. Again, I really, really like this. A lot of people say that, yeah, Andrei, but delegates are faster and so on. Sure, we don't always use the events, but when specific landmark events happen, it's very good for people to add things in there. There are way more events. And I actually used some of them to clean up some of the code that we're not using or you shouldn't be having just as bloat. And I've hooked in some methods, and then they did something, and then I just removed them. And then you have a package. That allows me to not have to go and look into a package. This is something that a colleague of mine, after we fleshed it out, wrote. And I did not have to go through his code and inject my own code that then I have to remove. So I can just create a script, connect my script to here, script does its work, remove script, delete script from project, done. Because we want people to easily be able to change something. Because people have different problems, surprise, surprise. And sometimes people maybe want to make something better because you started doing something and everybody has an idea. And I do believe and I do hope that there are some people that are smarter than us out there that will make better stuff, better decision, better code. And this is how we have to be able to empower those people to work and do better stuff based on our work. So an example to start from, we've seen, I hope we have, or at least I have seen quite a lot of this, when people just link to a button and then they attach an event in code. Sometimes you have a reason to do this, just add a listener to code. Sometimes you don't. I have a problem on this kind of code when it's not needed. It's because now I need to go and dig through some code file just to see, okay, but what calls this? When is this called? And if I would just attach something on the buttons event, then I can just click and that takes me at least to a class and I need to dig through. But if I do it the other way around, if my class takes a button, you can see how this can become a problem. Plus that this is in a package. So how do I remove this? Of course, You can if you really, really want to, but by default, you can't change code in a package. Unless, you take it in development mode, put it to disk, do some changes. So don't force people to do stuff, unless you have a reason. Of course, nothing is, this is not a religion. Don't do what I say. Just take this in consideration. Right, so if I'm saying don't do the previous thing, how else? Well, again, use the Unity event system. Why not? We have a system to solve this, and it's already there. And I even use it for internal stuff because now when my application starts, it will start and do things. And again, everything matters. So it will start. This will probably be triggered first, and I hope this is how it's being read. So the config will try to update itself, and when it's done, it will say, okay, cool, download whatever files you need for startup, and that's some items, and then there's the connectome, we call it, and there's events called when these happen. And now, at least, you don't have to open a file to see where this is called. You can read this. Of course, it doesn't have full overview of the code, but it's way more than what I've showed earlier. Also, variants. I really like variants. We were so happy when Unity introduced variants because this is, you create a prefab and this is how you enable people to extend your prefabs. You create a variant, and not only, of course, but if I can create myself a proper variant, then people can extend that. I like to see variants as you would extend a class, but to a way higher level, because it's pretty, it's readable, it's easy to swap things, it allows you to do so much stuff. Create a variant in your system, I update my package, your variant gets updated. You don't have to do a lot of code rewriting and so on. This is great. And why is that? And then I have a proper example put in the Lego world. I'm not going to give you sounds. You want probably sounds. I jump around, I hit things, some metallic, some I don't know what you're going to use this for. You're not getting sounds. But you can get from some of our packages, for example, even in the public space, you'll get, there's a minifigure and a mini doll package. And based on that, you might want to add some sounds. Things walk around, they hit things. And they shoot something. Maybe you just want to put a pistol that shoots. But if I change, let's just say I changed the rig. Well, imagine if you would have to just do all of that again and just put all the scripts on top of the rig and assemble this yourself. I provide you a prefab. You make a variant out of it. So this is when Unity asks you, do you want a variant or not? Usually your answer is yes, I want a variant. Give me a variant out of this. Unless you have your own reasons. Right. Because this allows changes to be visible. People usually understand this more than your code. Again, not everybody is technical. We would like them to be. As an engineer myself, I would like everybody to understand my code, but the world is what it is, and we don't have control over that. So, but let's take an imaginary scenario where everything you provide is a modal behavior. And I have to set up this game object structure. I have to put things together. And now you update everything. Now you broke everything. This is why you should assemble things in a prefab. Just give me that. I'll put it in. I'll edit it if I want. Then you can update your package. You don't break anything. And everything is fine. Everybody loves this. Right. Another example for change, and something that hopefully helps people create better code. Sometimes we need to use constants for different things. And let's say I call a backend to get my asset bundles, and then I don't want to call my backend because I want to prepare a package that I just want to give you. And you make a URL thing, you assemble it, but then when you save something to disk, I just already have the asset bundles on my disk because Unity caches them, and I just want to reuse my cache. And I'm like, okay, there you go. I'll just put this as part of my delivery. But all of a sudden on my disk, I can't use all this fancy URL encoding thing because, especially on Windows, the file system will say, So of course that had a rename. So they look a little bit different, and because our URL is a very good way for us to version, and the version is there, we use that as a hash. But from the disk, then I have to load something different. The system is almost the same, but I just have to change a constant. You can't change a constant. But you can change the way you access this. So I know this is hard, but try to think at some point, how do I enable people to change a constant? So virtual. Virtual's a pretty good way to allow people access to some of the things you don't have access to. So you can't change the thing, but you can change the way you access it. And then people can just write another class. As you see, this is the whole class to the right. Because everything I want to do in loading is pretty much Unity, when downloading an asset bundle, can download it from disk. So if the path is different, if the path is correct, we can just do the exact same thing. But all you have to do is maybe a few changes here and there. So then I just extended my previous class, and all I had to do is change some constants. Right, but you can tell me, Andrei, but I can just ask the backend, or I can ask something else to provide this for me. And why do I need to have this in code? You could, but then do you want it's a hit to your maintainability. The more abstraction you add, because I know some colleagues that really wanted to say, okay, I want this package that does everything. I'm like, yeah, I know, we all do. But the problem is that flexibility impacts your readability and maintainability. So as an architect, at some point, you need to take a decision like, okay, well, where's the drop-off point? Where is it not feasible? Another thing that I have a really big beef with is public-private fields, internal and sealed. Some people use them randomly, and they actually mean something, back to your code meaning something. I keep asking people, if protected, I'm cool with that. You can use it to your discretion. But when you use public and private, I'm not saying don't, but please have a reason. Because private prevents me from extending your class and using all its features. Public everywhere creates a mess. So let's just say a lot of stuff I don't use. I do your object dot wee. Yeah. So that makes things very complicated. Plus that public's hard to debug. Like if everything can change something, people would just start changing stuff everywhere. And I'm like, oh God. Especially if you want to make a big system. Same for internal and sealed. Please have a reason. I'm not saying don't, but please be mindful, because other people probably want to build on top of your stuff and add functionality, do changes. Because ultimately, the way you write your code matters. People will try to make meaning, get meaning out of whatever you deliver. And yeah, as you know, sometimes we have misunderstandings when we talk to people because they said something we misinterpreted. People might misinterpret your code. Right. So fun part, freebies. We have a demo package, and it's on GitHub. You can access this presentation, from what I was told by my partners from Unity. This presentation will be made available, so this won't get lost. But some people just go very, very fast through pages with QR, so I'll stay here for a while. It's also kind of easy to follow because hopefully the link makes sense also. If I go to that, and you can see what it is. It's a GitHub repository, which is archived. And there's a few reasons for this. So first of all, there's a Unity package there, and this is not a proper package because we want to communicate that this is not a code base. This is just a demo package that you can use to go through this. And we do not commit for now to work on this, as this is not a final piece of code. Many things change. And again, usually when you write code, you don't want to confuse people. So another reason why we write this is because we're just opening to the community, and we're just starting to share code. So I had to involve legal quite a lot. And they're like, we need licenses everywhere. So you get a license. Now you can't see, you didn't see it, it's there. So you'll hit this first. It's part of the README file, and there's also part of the license, which means that some of these things, most of these things can be used by you. For an example, you can use the code if you want. There are some normal maps and some stuff that have the Lego logo and so on, and you cannot redistribute that. Right, so let's just say you download that package, and as I said, we're a big fan of, oh yeah, back to my presentation. Okay, come on, machine, Alt-Tab, thank you. So all you'll have to do is import it and run the one scene. Optionally, this will run just fine without it, but optionally set the color space to gamma because we have skin change functionality there, which is skin color change. That will only work with that for now. Again, this is something we tested out. So, yep, so let's see. I've already imported this in a Unity project that is a blank one. So empty project, package imported. I've also made this package so you can import it as a package afterwards, so you can test the other functionality with importing the features. So for now, let's just say this main scene is loaded for this. For out of respect for, I hope you believe me that I haven't done anything for this. So if we just run this, you'll get this, and this runs offline. So I tried to do my best so my presentation can run just fine for you. Also, remember this. The wing has glitter in it, because by default, if I imported the package, I imported it with everything. So the old packages, you import stuff. Of course, you can remove some of the things if you want to, but it is what it is. But let's just say I want to use this as a package, because maybe you want to do the package trick I was talking before earlier. So let's just delete this. Live demos are the best demos. My heart rate's like going through the roof. Right, cool. So let's just go back to this sample scene. So this is a standard URP environment. And let's just say I go to my package manager and add a package to the disk, from the disk. I've done, of course, a little bit of preparation because we only have so much time. The main important thing is move the package out, add the tildes to the relevant files. This will be part of the presentation, so you will see it later. And yeah, just import it from disk. As I said, normally what we would do is import it from the backend. Unity is actually very, very fast importing this from the disk. And there we go. What I want to do is import now the sample scene and the offline files. I was thinking maybe I should put that out, but you can import these two because, yeah, you don't want to dig through a package. I could have left some stuff in the package, but that's how you do samples, right? So there you go. Now we have a sample scene. I'll load this. Since now the offline files are a little bit in a different place, I still don't want to change it that much. I made in, wow, yeah, live demos in the curved space. Love it. There's the package version of this prefab, so I'll just turn this off, link these two there. So, boom, done. This should work. Right. There you go. Now it's a package. You can also do an exercise and imagine this is online, because this is how we do it in the office. But yes, there's only so much we could do. But since I only imported the offline file and the sample files, all those features that I had, one of them is no glitter. Why is this cool? Because in most of the situations, you don't care. So if the distance is big enough, imagine you make an MMO. I don't want to force stuff upon you. I don't want to force you to bloat your app with what I want. But I also want, at the same time, to give the designers full control over what they put in. So this is the size, this is what is needed and for what, and then they can decide, okay, cool, I take a conscious decision to import everything. And as an engineer, I don't have to do anything, because my material references things in those folders that now get copied into the project. And now if I run and say, well, cool, load this. There you go, have the glitter. It's, of course, there are more elegant ways if you want to do this with an editor script, but I'm paying for the whole engine. I'm going to use the whole engine. So, yes, thank you very much, everybody. And I think hopefully this was of some use to you. I'll be going to the wrap-up session. If you have any questions about what happened here, we have only 5 minutes left, so that doesn't give us too much time. I'll be heading there. Drop by if you have questions about something I've said, about the LEGO group in general, about anything. And if we meet during the day, I'll be the man in the black trench coat. Thank you, everybody.